Numerous reports indicate that manufacturing has emerged as the favorite target of ransomware groups and hackers. In response, a new report from Industrial Media discusses the evolution of industrial cybersecurity, its current state, and the tactics hackers are using, including phishing schemes, malware, and ransomware attacks. It also details solutions in arming manufacturers with the knowledge and resources needed to win more fights on this highly complex and ultra-competitive battlefield. Download the industrial sector's new battlefield by going to manufacturing.net/cyber. Hi, I'm Jeff Ranke, Editorial Director of Manufacturing.net and Manufacturing Business Technology. Welcome to Security Breach. Netskope Threat Labs, a leading provider of threat analysis and cyber defense strategies for cloud-based vulnerabilities, recently published their Threat Labs report, which was focused on the manufacturing sector. Now, we've spoken about cloud access security concerns previously on Security Breach, but Netskope's report offers some truly eye-opening data in reinforcing the need to keep cloud-based assets secure. More specifically, the report found that cloud-delivered malware increased from 32 to 66% in the past 12 months, led by downloads from popular apps like Microsoft OneDrive, Google Drive, and Gmail. The report also showed that 94% of users downloaded data from an average of 17 different cloud apps each month. Also, over the last year, the number of users uploading to cloud apps in manufacturing increased 27%. The most common types of malware can be classified as Trojans, which are commonly used by attackers to hide within a system or network in gaining an initial foothold and delivering other types of malware, such as info stealers, backdoor access portals, or ransomware. Emotet, AgentTesla, and BlackBasta were among the top malware and ransomware groups targeting manufacturing over the last 12 months. Additionally, malware described as file-based exploits saw a significant uptick in use by these black hat organizations. The strategy entails the use of document files that can attack unpatched versions of Adobe Acrobat, Adobe Reader, Microsoft Office, or Linux. The report went on to cite that most cloud app hacks stem from evading security controls that rely almost exclusively on blocking known nefarious domains and URLs, as opposed to higher levels of scrutiny related to cloud traffic. Fortunately, our guest for today's episode is well aware of these challenges and has some insight on how the industrial sector can keep the cloud safe. But before we talk to him, we're excited to announce that Security Breach is being sponsored by Pentera. For more information on how automated security validation can help you safely test all your IT security controls with a click of a button in a non-stop industrial operational environment, visit Pentera.io. It's now my pleasure to introduce Ray Canzanese. He's the director of Netskope Threat Labs. Ray, thanks for joining us today, and welcome to Security Breach. So, Ray, thanks so much for joining us today on Security Breach. You know, we've talked about cloud security previously, but this is really your wheelhouse. Maybe you can talk to us, give us a little bit more in-depth perspective in terms of what are some of the bigger vulnerabilities. And it seems like this has really become a bigger concern maybe over the last 3 or 4 years. Maybe you can talk us through a little bit of the evolution of some of these cybersecurity concerns as it relates to the cloud.
Yeah, for sure. So I think a lot of those concerns that you've seen grow over the past 3 or 4 years, they're the same concerns. And the reason they're growing is because we are just adopting the cloud more and more. So it used to be like the concern of the trailblazer, who was the first one to move to the cloud. Now it's the concern of everybody because we're all there using so many cloud apps all the time. And so really two different things happen, right? One is that when you take things and you move them to the cloud, you're creating some new attack surface. So, and even if it's just like a SaaS app, right? Even if it's like Microsoft 365 and you're like, well, I moved it to the cloud. I don't have to worry about firewall anymore, right? It's simpler because it's a SaaS app. It didn't mean that the attack surface went away. The attack surface is just different now, right? So like with Microsoft 365, I mean, that's the number one phishing target we see, right? Because attackers know if darn near everybody is using Microsoft 365 and all their emails there and all their documents are there, then all I have to do is get one of them, who maybe doesn't have MFA configured or whose MFA I can bypass to give up their credentials, and you get everything that's there. So, it's new attack surface. It's different attack surface. So we needed attackers to get smart to how to attack that surface, right? But it's there and it's different. The other thing that happened, this is kind of like the other angle, is that, you go and you create this cool new app that all of the people that just want to do good in their lives and help everybody, they're going to go out and use that. But so is everybody else who's going to try to use it to attack other people as well. And so you see these cloud apps also being used as an attack vector. One of the really common things we see is because of how ubiquitous Google Drive and OneDrive are, if you're an attacker, upload some malware to OneDrive and then go into OneDrive and say, share this with Ray. And then Ray gets an email that says, somebody shared a document with you in OneDrive. And I look at that and I go, click, because I click on every document anybody ever shares with me in OneDrive, because I have to, right? That's my job to click on all those things and open those documents. And so you get both of those things happen, right? A lot of new attack surface for attackers to go after, and a bunch of new tools for attackers to use to attack people with as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I found, and I really enjoyed the threat report, especially this latest one that was focused specifically on manufacturing. Can't recommend it enough. Have folks take a look at that. But I was really blown away by just the apps that have triggered the most malware attacks, how common they are. You mentioned the OneDrive, but we've got Google Drive, we've got Gmail in there, a lot of other things like that. And to me, it really reinforces the role of humans and just their activity in terms of as part of the cyber defense plan. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how you've seen the human element come in and maybe some best practices in terms of how do we get folks to realize the key role they play in preventing some of these attacks.
Yeah, so the cool thing about those stats that we publish is that the stats are a reflection both of what the attackers are doing and the human element on the other side, right? So it's not saying like there's more malware in OneDrive than there is elsewhere, right? It's saying that like as we watch enterprise employees, what they're clicking on and like what they're falling for the attacks that come through the apps that they use all the time, right? That's sort of the human element here, is that if I kind of joked that, of course, I click on every OneDrive link that I receive, but it's not that far-fetched. I kind of do click on almost every OneDrive link that I see. And that's not unusual across sort of the swath of all industries and all enterprise users, is that if there's some set of things that you use all the time, you become very comfortable with that set of things. And you start going like, oh, this link came in from Asana. Of course, I'll click on that. This link from OneDrive. Yeah. Oh, I use Google Drive too. I'll click on that one. And so all these things are just things you're comfortable with, you're used to. And we've trained our users a lot, right? Because, we said, like be on the lookout for these warning signs. The URL's weird. It came from somebody you don't recognize. Most of the phishing links that I get, they come from Sanjay Barry, who's my CEO, and they look like they are Google Drive links or OneDrive shares, right? Like they don't have those telltale signs of this is bad, and so it's a lot harder for your average person to just have this feeling that something is off, and based on that feeling that something is off, make the right cybersecurity decision every single time.
Yeah. No, they're getting the bad guys are getting a lot smarter. We've talked about that a lot. One of the interesting things too is we see this huge uptick in malware uplinks through the cloud, as we've been discussing. We see similar upticks in the OT environment for manufacturers. People attacking there, uploading malware that sits there for a long time and creates problems down the road. There we have kind of a visibility issue. It's hard to see everything within the OT environment. Is it similar with cloud? Is it hard to see? Is it hard to assess who's coming in and out of these apps to really get a feel for where things are coming from? Or what's maybe the bigger underlying concern when it comes to a lot of these cloud-based attacks?
So just in general, I don't know that I've ever talked to anybody that said, I have all the visibility I want into everything that's happening into my environment.
Right.
There's always blind spots. And I feel like one of the things that cloud has done to us is created a bunch of blind spots because there's so many cloud apps that everybody is using that as soon as you take something that maybe you used to have on-prem and you were monitoring and you move it to the cloud, you've now created a new blind spot, right? And so you've got people, using, I'd say, I don't know, I probably interact with 25 different cloud apps every day, just like in my day-to-day. If you look across large organizations, we see orgs that have thousands of different cloud apps in use. Do you have full visibility into all of those apps in addition to everything you have on-prem? No, it's become a very complex issue, even in some cases, to know which cloud apps your users are interacting with every day, right? It's not just like, do I have the logs from that app? It's like, oh darn, I didn't even realize that anybody was using that app, let alone that there was 1,000 people in this org over there that are using it to, store all of the sensitive information they process. So just that bit of discovery of what's in use has become challenging because of how everything's moved to the cloud.
So how do we balance that? We want to use all these different programs to help us get, whether it's see more data, become more data friendly in terms of what we're bringing in and looking at. How do we balance between, hey, we want to utilize all these different tools and resources that are out there with, we need to be careful with everything we're bringing in, looking at who we give access to. What is the balance? Is it as simple as being more careful with our logins and the stuff we're using and like you said, sort of inventorying all the tools, or is it more in depth than that, I guess?
So yeah, one of the strategies that I'm a big fan of is like, we're kind of talking right now and recognizing like, hey, this is a problem and we should do something about it, right? Oftentimes the best thing to do when you realize something's a problem and you should do something about it is put a stake in the ground right then and there. So if you can say like, I understand that for the history of the company, everybody's been allowed to do whatever they want, pick up cloud apps, like do everything you please. That's been wonderful, but there are security risks associated with that. So from this day forward, nothing new is coming in, right? Unless it's coming through us, right? And so like that, it gives you don't have to worry about boiling the ocean because you don't have to go back and correct 10 years worth of mistakes. Start with, we have what we have and let's not make it worse. And while it doesn't get worse, we can start trending back to where we want to be. But certainly just saying like, let's, I've seen this before, like, we use Microsoft 365 here. So can't we just tell everybody to use Microsoft 365 and shut everything else off? And the answer is usually, well, do you know what everything else is, right? And it's like, well, no, I'm actually not sure. So how are you going to shut it off, right? Who are you going to affect if you shut it off? So it's kind of circling back to the observability question. Put a stake in the ground, try to take inventory of where you are, and then find places where you can chip away at that and start locking things down the way you want to lock it down.
No, that makes a ton of sense. Going through the report and just even a little bit in our conversation here, what I'm wondering, and I'm wondering if you've come across this as well in working with some of your customers, is there almost a sense of like app hubris? We've been raised on smartphones. We've had them in our back pocket here for the last decade. Is it a feeling where the user knows, hey, look, I know when I go to the app store, I put this on my phone, I know what I'm doing, I've been doing this for a while. Is that part of the exploit that hackers are taking advantage of?
I mean, everybody knows what's best for them, right? I mean, if there's something that I need to do, the best way to do it is whatever Google shows me as the number one result to do it, right? I mean, that's always been the challenge here, right? That everybody's kind of doing what they think is best for themselves and what they need to do. And oftentimes people just need a little bit of coaching, a little bit of like, hey, please don't convert PDFs that way. I don't want you uploading all these sensitive company documents to this random website you just found, right? And so that's kind of what we're up against, right? Is everybody, knows what they know and is trying to do what they think is best. And they all need a little bit of coaching, right? A little bit of, don't do that, do this instead. And that's probably the best way to tackle this problem of, let's call it cloud apps running rampant.
Absolutely. So we've been talking a little bit about Netskope and some of the things you do, but maybe you can give us a little more detail about what you guys are doing, especially for the manufacturing sector and some of the things that you offer.
Yeah, sure. So, man, it's cybersecurity. So we love acronyms. And so Netskope's favorite cybersecurity acronym is SASE. This is a relatively new one, right? It's Secure Access Service Edge, SASE. I love saying it. But that acronym, right, it's all about protecting users, data, and applications, regardless of where they are, right? So like you have your users, you have the stuff that they need access to, and you want to provide them that interface to access what they need and only what they need to do their jobs. And so that's the approach we take, in the industrial sector. I think it's an especially important approach because in the industrial sector, you're always going to have on-prem stuff, right? Like there's some companies we work with where everything's moved to the cloud, right? And you're like, okay, that's great, that's easy, right? But in the industrial sector, there's always going to be the stuff that's on-prem supporting the industrial processes. Of course, like everything front of house is going to go to the cloud, right? Because everybody's moved things to the cloud. There's going to be things supporting the industrial processes that are in the cloud, and so you end up in this really weird hybrid environment, right? Where you have apps that need access to apps, you have people that need access to apps, you need people that need access to hardware and processes, and making sure that you're putting controls in place that ensure that like none of that stuff's ever exposed to the internet. Sure, it's talking to other apps, but nobody from the outside can find their way in, right? Users have access just to what they need. It's not like, oh, I log into the VPN and now I can check my email or I can shut down the reactor, right? I mean, like we're getting rid of these sort of, I don't want to call them antiquated, but maybe let's just say slightly outdated notions of like using VPNs and network segmentation to solve these kinds of problems, and sort of just up leveling a little bit, making it more so that you can control all that stuff regardless of where the stuff is. And regardless of where those users are, because increasingly the stuff's all over the world, the users are all over the world. And so you need to make sure your controls work regardless of, whether it's Ray in the factory trying to do something, Ray sitting in his office at home doing something, or Ray at the coffee shop, right? It doesn't matter where I am, right? We've got to place better controls around these things.
No, I think the polite way of saying that, and we know this in the industrial sector, there's a lot of legacy equipment and practices that have been in place that do need to be updated, and things that I think we've gotten better at throughout the sector in the last 2 or 3 years because we've had to. There's been this huge surge in attacks, all sorts, led by ransomware because that gets the most headlines and definitely gets more attention in the boardroom. But I'm kind of wondering, Netskope works with a variety of different industries. From your perspective, what kind of makes manufacturing unique from the attacker's perspective? What do they see as, boy, I get why everybody's going after manufacturing. Is there some really alluring element that you've been able to pinpoint?
I will sort of use the same term you just used, which is the legacy-ness of it, right? Like if you're going to go after somebody and you kind of, understand that there's a sector that maybe lags behind others in adopting new security practices or whatever, they're going to be the easier ones to go after. And so in some ways, being the first to move to the cloud, kind of helps because everybody's like, well, new techniques I have to learn. Everybody's lazy, right? Why would you learn new techniques? Just use the same techniques you've always used and go after the people that haven't moved to the cloud yet, right? And I think that our reporting kind of shows that manufacturing has lagged other industries in terms of cloud adoption, in terms of things that we're seeing, sort of run rampant in other sectors, like the technology sector, right? They were like the first ones to the cloud, right? And so that legacy, it's kind of like a way in, right? A lot of the attacks we see are still like, oops, those servers were exposed to the internet. Oh yeah, you're right. All those machines that I have in the factory that run Windows XP, oh yeah, they were on globally routable IP addresses, not behind a NAT, and they had RDP open, right? Like that kind of stuff that you don't see maybe as much in other industries anymore. There's still a lot of that around, and that's a lot of risk surface and attack surface that these days is so well automated that if it's there, somebody's going to find it.
Yeah, the bad guys are getting more automated as well, getting smarter in the way they're going after things too. One of the things that we've had other guests on the show, and we've talked about cloud specifically, they've referenced the potential for some of the big cloud server providers getting more involved from a cybersecurity perspective. So the Amazons, the Microsoft, the Googles. Are you seeing a similar dynamic?
Yeah, absolutely. When you get to that level of size, when you're as big as Amazon or Microsoft or Google are, you have a lot of visibility, right? And a lot of influence and power to disrupt. And so we do see a lot of organizations of that size working hand in hand with law enforcement, right? When they start seeing things happening in their environments, affecting their customers or even abusing their platforms, right? Because we did talk about, OneDrive abuse. When they see that kind of stuff, they're going to work with law enforcement to prosecute, right? And so these things we're talking about aren't secrets to Microsoft, right? Microsoft isn't unaware that people are abusing Microsoft products, right? They are acutely aware of the abuse of their products and the targeting of their customers, right? And they are doing everything they can, right, to reduce that abuse, to prosecute people that they find. These are just, we wouldn't be talking about these, right? You and I wouldn't be here talking about this if these were easy problems to solve, right? These are very, very challenging societal level problems to solve, right? Because we're talking about people here as well, right? We're talking about people abusing things to target other people, right? There's so many different elements to this. It's not like, if only the people at Microsoft had thought about the fact that their products might be abused and they had like a switch plugged in there where they could say abuse not allowed, right? It's nothing is that simple.
Exactly. So, one of the things when I get on my soapbox a little bit about industrial cybersecurity is I don't think folks are talking to each other enough. When an attack happens, especially the ransomware stuff, because there's a little bit of embarrassment involved. People don't want to, sort of let out too much information because they don't want to be scrutinized publicly, get some bad press. But I think if we shared more information, we could become a lot smarter on a lot of these vulnerabilities and the attacks. So I'm wondering, and I'm not sure how close you are to working with some of these bigger cloud companies, but do they wait for the customer to come to them and say, hey, we just had a bunch of Trojan malware dumped on our system via, OneDoc or via Google Drive? Or are those companies sort of taking the initiative upon themselves to find these situations and proceed on their own?
You'll see both of those things happening, right? You'll see customers reaching out and asking for help. You'll see vendors reaching out to customers and letting them know, I think you probably need some help based on what we've been seeing. Netskope's no different, right? We're not Microsoft or Google sized, right? But even within our customers, we'll have ones that reach out to us and then say, hey, we've got something going on. And we have systems and monitoring in place, right? Where we will see things happening in our customer environments and reach out and say, hey, I think you've got something going on here, right? Based on what we've seen, let us know what help you need, right? We're here to help you. That's more or less the same you'll see from any cybersecurity vendor across the industry. And of course, as soon as we know something, right? Like as soon as we know some TTP or some IOC that you can start blocking for all of your customers, we're going to do that, right? And you bet any cybersecurity vendor is going to do that, right? Because ultimately we're all here just to protect our customers, to help our customers out. So, we've got We've got automated processes even that are doing that, right? The sandbox just detonated some new malware, right? That we've never seen before, but we're certain it's malware, and we need to block that malware everywhere immediately, right? All of that kind of intelligence feedback, right? Like all of that stuff's happening in a way that's automatic to make sure that everybody is benefiting from that knowledge that we now have to protect all of our customers.
No, that's encouraging to hear. Excellent. Want to kind of throw a couple of different things, different topics that are sort of hot in cybersecurity right now, especially in the industrial sector. First one's artificial intelligence. You know, there's a lot of people who are really losing sleep over the fact that this is going to make attacks so much easier. I would contend it's also a great tool for the defensive posture as well. What's your take in terms of how AI is going to have an impact, helping or hurting some of the cybersecurity?
I mean, as somebody who's been working in cybersecurity for a while, can you imagine having been working in cybersecurity for the past, 10, 15 years and not having AI tools, right? I mean, like we have been in cybersecurity benefiting from AI for a long time, right? Whether, it's detecting malware or detecting phishing pages or detecting insider threats, there's way too much cybersecurity data, right? We've not had people staring at screens of log lines trying to say, "Ooh, look, malware! Ooh, look!" Right? I mean, like that's been, maybe early days it was expert systems, right? But it's been AI driven for a long time. And so when you see, things like large language models and ChatGPT become popular, as somebody who works in cybersecurity, you're like, "Ooh, I can't wait until we get to a point where I'm using those to query all that data I have, because I would love to forget the syntax for joining all 9 of these tables together in SQL so that I can find the thing that I'm looking for." Right. So I'm kind of selfishly looking forward to seeing a lot of this stuff, the new things show up in our security tooling, because of course it's going to make things better. So, when you see something like this, you don't look at that and say, "Oh, that could only be used for evil," right? You see the good that could come out of it, and then you see the opportunities for abuse, and you try to mitigate the opportunities for abuse. I think that's more or less the stage we're in now. Everybody, I think, sounds a little alarmist, but I at least my let's call it my rosy view of the world is that we're being alarmist to draw attention to the fact that there's opportunities for abuse there. Maybe we don't fully understand the opportunities for abuse yet. Maybe we just need to remind everybody to be conscious of that, and figure out what the right path forward is to minimize and mitigate that opportunity for abuse.
I've heard you reference that a couple times in our conversation, just educating or informing people on the right things to do. To me, that always comes back to a lot of things. My colleagues here will roll their eyes when I talk about blocking and tackling as being a key part of how we do our jobs. I mean, is a lot of cybersecurity, does it boil down to being that straightforward or that simple about it? It's just, hey, we just need to know, we just need to share information a little bit and let people know what's going on.
There are a lot of problems that can help. One interesting one that I'll share, right? It's related to AI, but not in a way that is, I think, in any way interesting, right? which is ChatGPT comes out, right? You can upload files to ChatGPT and send source code to ChatGPT, and you can say, like, "Where's this bug? Help me rewrite this email," right? What's the biggest thing that everybody's concerned about immediately? All of my employees are taking all of my company secrets and intellectual property and customer PII and uploading all of it to ChatGPT, right? Terrible thing to happen, right? Is it the scary thing that we're hearing about in the news every day? Probably not, but from like an enterprise cybersecurity point of view, probably the number one concern with these apps is, what are my users doing with this? Do they understand where it should and shouldn't be used? And so a lot of what we've been working with our customers to do is put some controls in place and do some education. Are you sure you would like to upload that thing to ChatGPT? Because I looked at it. I'm not a person. I'm just a machine, right? But I looked at what you were about to upload, and it feels like it's PII based on all of the things I've learned about over the past years. So that kind of stuff, right? Like that education. It is incredibly helpful, right? Because then you have people start saying, oh, I didn't even realize that when I was typing something in this window here, that it was going to somebody else's computer somewhere else where they were seeing it. And then everybody else interacting with that model might have seen that same stuff, right? It's just that's a lot of cognitive processing for anybody to fully comprehend the gravity of what they are doing every time they type some letters into a form on the internet.
Yeah, no, great advice. I like it. Last thing here, just sort of trends or different challenges we face in the industrial sector. And I'm sure you've encountered this as well. Just taking a lot of IT procedures and sort of cutting and pasting them over to the OT side. Some of it works, a lot of it doesn't. It just doesn't translate well because it's such a different operating environment. What have you seen there? What maybe advice you can give to people in terms of trying not to do that as much as maybe they have been?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of this is like there's no one simple trick, right? There's not a checklist that you're going to go through that is proven to work in everybody's environment flawlessly. You do have to, unfortunately, everybody is special. Every organization is special. You have to understand what makes your organization special and make sure that you're putting the controls in place that are appropriate for what it is that makes you special. There's lots of guidelines out there. There's lots of things that can help. But these aren't switches. These aren't stamps. It's not that one simple trick. It's not that new pill that came out that everybody says that if you take the pill, you can lose weight. Just don't ever stop taking the pill. Right? Like we don't even have one of those in cybersecurity yet. Right. Unfortunately, that's what it is, right? Understand your environment. And in understanding your environment, you'll be able to protect it. If you just pretend that your OT environment is the same as your IT environment without any understanding, the results you are going to get are going to reflect that lack of understanding.
No, makes sense. Hey, Ray, before we wrap up here, any other trends or anything else that you can see sort of coming down the pike, maybe having a bigger impact over the next year and a half or so?
Yeah, trends. Oh, so exciting trends, right? Let's talk about the positive trends. I do think just based on what we're seeing, I'm going to continue to see more organizations moving away from traditional legacy controls, fewer VPNs, more like proper zero trust implementations where it's not like you're on the network, access whatever you feel like accessing. I don't care what your role is, who you are, where you are. You won, you're inside, right? That seems to be going away at a really steady clip. I expect to see that accelerate, and I'm going to be really happy to see that continue. On the other side, abuse of the cloud apps that I keep talking about, increasing, that's going to keep coming. It's going to keep increasing. We see no signs of that stuff slowing down. So I did maybe one thing on the good news, the other thing on the bad news. The other thing, again, smiling, really happy that it's coming, the AI stuff. Right. I'm so excited about all these co-pilots, these interfaces to security data that hopefully cut down on the amount of time me and my team and everybody in cybersecurity spends writing SQL and fighting with their SIMs. Right. This is going to be great. On the other side, it's going to be a big mess, all this AI generated content all over the internet. It's going to be a really challenging thing for all of us to grapple with, whether, you're looking at Google results and trying to figure out what's real and what's not real, or you're running a cybersecurity organization and trying to protect your users. So there we go. That's two positive things, two not so positive things to leave you with.
No, great stuff, Ray. Really appreciate it. The one thing I just want to reinforce is when we talk about these cloud-based apps, we're not just talking about complex remote monitoring or instrumentation apps. We're talking about Gmail. We're talking about, OneDrive. We're talking about Google Drive. So it's the basic stuff too. It is the simple things too that are causing some problems.
We're talking about that website you go to that convert PDFs to JPEGs, right? We're talking about like everything that you're uploading data to or downloading data from, whether you're aware of it or not.
Ray, thanks so much for joining us. And to learn more about Netskope, you can check them out at netskope.com. That's netskope.com. Thank you for joining us today. And to catch up on past episodes, you can go to manufacturing.net, IEN.com, or mbtmag.com. You can also check Security Breach out wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple, Amazon, and Overcast. And if you have a cybersecurity story or topic that you'd like to have us explore on Security Breach, you can reach me at jeff@ien.com. For Ray Canzanese, I'm Jeff Ranke, and this is Security Breach.